And here we are down at the start. And what a race this is going to be. The first of the Remenham Challenge Cup races with our international crews, the Hollandia Roeiclub Club from the Netherlands and Waiariki Rowing Club from New Zealand.
So we go from an epic junior quads race to the open women's event. These are the two national, putative national crews from the Netherlands and from New Zealand. I saw the Kiwi girls out on the water this morning looking really sharp, and I think this has all the makings of another great race.
Yeah, the New Zealand women's 8, I mean, it's just gone from strength to strength over recent years. Competing at the Rio Olympic Games last year.
New Zealand.
And the first time we've seen the New Zealand national team here since 2013, so great to have them back.
They're here in force as well. You'll see many Kiwis in the semi-finals and finals over the next couple of days, and these women are tremendous athletes. They've got a really, really strong program, as you say now. Not to underestimate the Dutch crew as well, Dutch national squad crew, third in Rio, a couple of them in the pairs, 5 of them new to the team since then, and they're off.
Quite a composed, bit of a slower start there from the Kiwis, but now we see them winding into it. Sort of those first 3 strokes, they're really patient out of the blocks, but then they really start to wind it in through strokes 5 to 10.
Yeah, the 8s from silence to an explosion of power and oars and noise and pressure, and they're off to both a really good start here. I think it's going to be they're putting everything in the first part of the course to see who's going to get the early advantage. We see from the side here, as we pick up from our catamaran camera, the Kiwi women's 8 looking very strong as they stretch out after the start phase.
Yeah, and look, I mean, this is the 8 that won the World Cup just a couple of weeks ago in Poznan. Of course, knocking the US off that pedestal that they've had for so long. So nice to see someone else in the middle of the podium, and I think the Kiwis definitely the favourite for this race, but the Dutch women have such a history in 8s rowing and in women's sweep rowing generally, so I think this will be quite a good battle all the way down the track here.
Yeah, 2 smaller nations, but 2 nations with incredibly proud rowing histories here. And I know, talking to the coach of the Kiwis, Dan Kelly, saying Henley's a bit of an unknown to us. You know, we haven't raced on this kind of thing before, but we cannot wait to race here. And they look like they're enjoying themselves at this stage. Early in the race, they pulled out to about 3/4 of a length lead over the Dutch women's national 8 on the far side. 16 amazing athletes here at the top of their game, approaching the World Championships later on in this summer, and using Henley Royal Regatta as part of that training to reach tough opposition in the months ahead of the World Championships.
And we can see the Kiwi crew now moving out to about a length lead. Their stern just on the bow of the Dutch women. And I think it's so important in the 8. If you want to go out to win, you really have to get yourself in the game in the early stages. It's incredibly demoralising and incredibly hard, I think, to be in a crew that's being dropped by another 8, because you know how long that boat is, you know what distance it is that you have to claw back if you want to get yourself back into the game. And I think that this is a really tough blow that the Dutch have copped early on here, to have the Kiwis move probably just up into clear water over them.
Yeah, it's very hard, isn't it? They're going up against the people that they know already are the World Cup winners from Poznan, so they know that they've got that pace behind them. So the Dutch would have wanted to shake them off the start and try and stay with them and surprise them and rattle them. They haven't managed to do that, but it looks like the Dutch have settled into a solid rhythm now through the middle of the course. Long, relaxed strokes. You can see in both crews the quality of the rowing here. Loose, relaxed shoulders, tight, tidy blade work, reaching out long and strong to the front of the stroke, and then driving through the second half. We're going to see later this afternoon the grander men's open 8s events as well, and so we've got some really fantastic 8s racing here.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a few changes going on with this Dutch women's 8. It's only half of the crew that won the silver medal at the European Championships. There was a women's 4 from the Netherlands which won bronze, and they're actually in the 8 now, so they're clearly, you know, playing around with a few different things and seeing how these combinations go, and it's a great test for them. And to use Henley, I guess, as a bit of a marker on their international campaign to trial some different crews and come up against another top 8 that they can really compare themselves to. The Kiwis, I mean, they're the pace setters at the moment.
Well, you're right, and of course you know better than anybody, it's a 4-year Olympic cycle, so often after Olympics the next year is a rebuilding year. Some younger athletes coming into the team and being blooded and gaining experience, and combinations being tried around, so that's what's going on in the Netherlands right now.
And another really great thing that's happened this year with the FISA rule change, aside from, of course, the women's 4 now being an Olympic event, but FISA has allowed for male coxswains to cox female events and female coxswains to cox the male events. And so we actually saw a female cox in the Dutch men's 8 earlier this year, and of course we have Sam Bosworth here coxing the Kiwi women's 8. So it's all about finding the best athletes for those positions rather than necessarily it being gender specific.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, you know, he's a man with some real experience. He won gold at the Under-23 World Championships in the men's cox 4 for New Zealand. And so now here he is with the women's 8, bringing that experience across. How would you compare men's and women's rowing? Do you think there's a difference in what the cox will be doing to drive these athletes on? There's obviously a bit of a difference in power, but how does it compare?
Yeah, look, I think that there is a big difference. I mean, over the years, I got the opportunity to jump in the men's 8 from time to time up in the back end and do some work with the Aussie men's squad. And, you know, we have the odd boy come and jump in the crew, you know, filling in the women's 8 or the women's 4 or quad. And it's always really interesting to have that exchange of knowledge because we do things very differently. The men can rely on that brute strength that they have, but the women not so much. So we tend to, I think, do things maybe a little better technically.
Sarah, I think you're being very subtle. What you're saying is that the men can afford to be less technically good and the women have to focus on being technically better, just like a lightweight against a heavyweight. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, look, I think that's probably the best comparison that you can make, is that the women really have to pay attention to the way that they're rowing, and we tend to row a little bit differently because of the sheer power that the men generate under the water. They can tend to take a little bit more time around the back turn as that boat rolls on. We don't have as much power through the water, which requires us to be a little more fluid through the back end. So it's quite a distinct difference, I think, between men's and women's 8 rowing. And the Kiwi women are doing that really well at the moment. You can see there is no pause at the back end there. The handles keep moving, the elbows keep moving. There's a moment of stillness with the body. Of course, you want to get everything out of that, but the handle never stops.
You can see it beautifully illustrated here. We're looking at the New Zealand women's 8 from head on, looking down the course, and you can see how they're kind of straight through to the finish. The hands reach the body and then go straight back out again to keep a bit more rhythm and a bit more speed on the boat as they go forward there. Beautiful overhead shot showing that they now have a couple of lengths of clear water over the Dutch. It's going to be hurting the women in the Dutch 8 now.
Yeah, look, I think that this is far too big a lead now for them to really have any chance of getting back onto par with these Kiwi women who are looking really, really strong. I think the Kiwis looked a little flustered out at the start, but I mean, it's really hard in match racing because you don't know what's going to happen and anything could happen. So I think it's always, we tend to see that the crews, as they start to extend their lead and look a bit more confident and long and start to cruise along and really do it better all the way down the track. And that's what we're seeing here. Some great rowing from this Kiwi women's 8.
This is going to feel good as they row past the enclosures to the applause of many, many spectators in the Pat Stewart enclosure here. Crossing the line first, the national squad of Australia, the women's 8 looking extremely strong all the way down the track. Really dominated the Dutch from the start, opened up an impressive lead, and the Dutch cross the line now exhausted, but with more experience under their belt as they progress through the season with this brand new 8.
Look, and I think this will be the first of many Kiwi crews that we see through to the final tomorrow. Of course, the national team joining us here at the Henley Royal Regatta for the first time in 4 years. So I think it's the second Kiwi crew through to a final today that I've seen, but up against the Dutch women's 8 here. A very strong 8 in their own right, and we'll see a lot more out of them at the upcoming World Cups and the World Championships later in the year. But it will be the Kiwis through to tomorrow's final in the Remenham Challenge Cup.